And we're back. And I want to unpack those statements about practicing a little bit more. First of all, let's talk about the most important rule of practicing. Practicing means repeating sections correctly. This is so important, I'm going to say it again. Practice means repeating sections correctly. I'll say it again. Practice means repeating sections correctly. I'll say it a third time. Practice means repeating sections correctly. You have to do all three of those things to make sure that you are indeed practicing. When you play your pieces and when you're working on your pieces, you need to have practice sections, an identifiable start and stop of a discrete piece of your music. You need to make sure that what you are doing is actually correct. You're deciphering the notation correctly. You're playing the correct rhythms, the correct notes with the correct dynamic levels. All those things, you're doing it correctly. And then you don't just do it once, you do it several times. So, I'm kind of saying three different rules in our overarching rule of practicing. Because practice means repeating sections correctly. Practice means repeating sections correctly. Practice means repeating sections correctly. And practice means repeating sections correctly. Now that last word, correctly, that's where our second rule of practice comes in. You see, in order to practice, you have to be doing it correctly. It's not practicing until you're actually doing it correctly. So, in order to practice, you must first learn. And that means going to the music, looking at the notation, and making sure you're deciphering everything absolutely correctly. Whenever we go about the process of learning, I like to break it down into these steps in this order. When you're learning, 1, make sure you're doing the rhythm correctly. Spend time focusing only on the rhythm. Okay? Now, with piano music, you have a lot of times where there are coinciding rhythms. So, when we first start learning, we learn the rhythms hand separately. We learn the rhythm for the right hand or the rhythm for the melody. And then we learn the rhythm for the accompaniment. And then we go about the process of making sure those two rhythms happen together correctly and coordinating that. The next thing you want to work on, funny enough, the next most important thing is actually the fingering. So I may say this in different orders, but these two are inextricably linked, the notes and the fingering. And if you focus on making sure you do the fingering correctly and you keep your fingering consistent, you will find that you will learn music much faster. You see, fingering is proof that the editors of your book love you and want you to be successful. It is their cheat codes. They've gone through and they've figured out however many different ways there are to play this passage, and they've found the easiest way to play it. And they've told you what the easiest way to play the passage is by giving you finger numbers. Don't ignore the cheat codes. Make it as easy as it needs to be. Okay? So, in order to practice, you must first learn. We start by learning the rhythm. Then we learn the notes and the fingers. Now it's a process of combining things. So the next step would be notes, fingers, and the rhythm all at once, right? Now sometimes we further break it down so it's notes, fingers, and rhythm, hands separately. And then we go to hands together, and maybe we take out the counting aspect and we just make sure we're getting the coordination right. We're getting the notes and the fingers correct, and the things that happen simultaneously. Then we add the counting back to it. And now we're doing notes, fingering, and counting, super slow, hands together. Now, once you've gotten to that point, you can say you have indeed learned, and it's time to practice. So you can see that our third saying, divide and conquer, assimilate or die, is kind of what's also going on in our learning process. We're taking the elements of music and we're breaking them down into different parts. We're looking at just the rhythm first. We're dividing the rhythm from the rest of the texture, and we're making sure we know the rhythm exactly correctly. We conquer the rhythm. Then we look at just the pitch component, and we add a technical component, which is our fingers, and we make sure we're getting the notes and the fingers correct. We've divided and conquered that. But now it's time to assimilate or die. We need to put the notes and fingers together with the rhythm. And then we get our notes and fingers and counting along slowly. We've divided and conquered. We've assimilated rather than dying. Fourth, when something seems difficult or something seems too hard, you need to make it easier in some other way. And again, that's kind of what we did with our learning process. Throwing you into hands together at tempo is way too difficult at the beginning. You can't do it. So what do? Is we make it easier. We make it easier by playing not the whole piece, making it just a section, playing not both hands, making it just maybe the right hand, not playing it at tempo, slowing the tempo way down, and then making sure, we're just focused on notes and fingers. Maybe we're not even counting. So when something seems too hard, make sure you have a strategy to make it a little bit easier some other way. Maybe you're trying to do something hands together for the first time and it's just not panning out. Perhaps you need to slow down and try again. Or maybe you've slowed down and you still can't quite get it right. Well, maybe you need to break your practice section in half and do a shorter section. Maybe you can do just half of the section correctly, get it, do the second half of the section correctly, get it, and then put them back together. So when something seems too hard or you're starting to get frustrated, look for a way to make it easier. Again, this is dividing and conquering so that you can go back and assimilate rather than die. And finally, make sure that your goal is not perfection, especially the first day you work on something. The first day you work on something, you're not going to get to perfection. You're not going to get to hands together at tempo the whole piece. And to expect to do that in one practice section is just setting yourself up to be frustrated. Instead, know that you're going to be chipping away at these skills, and these skills will cumulatively build until you have the complete piece of repertoire, or the complete scale, or the complete cadence, or the complete set of keys that you're working on for the cadence, okay? So part of not aiming for perfection on the first day is realizing you're going for a cumulative effect. So suck less every day. It's important that you come back to the piano every day. You can expect to lose about 50 to 60% of what you learned after one day when you come back to practice the next time. Okay, so think about that. You practice really hard, you get this much done. The next day, you'll have this much of it retained. And what you'll need to do is review, and then you can learn a little bit more. And then about 50% of that will be curtailed after the second day. You'll review, and then you'll learn a little bit more. Well, if you wait 2 days, you can expect to lose 70 to 85% of what you've learned. And if you wait 3 days, you can expect to lose 85 to 90% of what you've learned. Okay, so the trick to really progressing at the piano is not to forget all that you've worked on in your practice sections. That means coming back and reinforcing daily so that you can continue to build on your skills. All right, so we've unpacked a little bit what we mean with our 5 practice maxims. Practice means repeating sections correctly. In order to practice, you must first learn, divide and conquer, assimilate, or die. When something seems too hard, make it easier in some other way. And finally, suck less every day. Come back and we're going to go over this process in a specific piece of music, and that is Miniature Waltz on page 33 of Alfred's Group Piano for Adults. See you then.